Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Joining these new sessions of the DEMN lecture series. Today, we have Dr. Paul Allison, who will talk about the role of the horticulture in disaster and emergency management. Before going any further, I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. The campus is located on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Swangi and Esquimalt nations. And I'm very pleased and proud of the working, living, and playing the land that belongs to the dispersed First Nations people. They've been, the responsible and care the land as we have it, the topic of the day, they've been very close in the close relationship with the nature and being guardians of these lands for the decades and for the years and years. So before going further, and I invite Paul to share his screen and start the presentation, I'm pleased also to introduce Paul. So Paul is originally from Cornwall, England, and has been in service for horticulture for over 50 years. In the early 1980s, as he told me, he immigrated to Canada, where he pioneered the use of the horticulture therapy and to design gardens for the people to grow in. Paul is said to have the hands of a gardener, the mind of the scientist, and the vision of an artist, all firmly rooted in the heart of the naturalist, which I agree with that. We cannot dispute about it. Paul currently is an associate professor at the Royal Roads University and enjoys teaching and sharing his passion for the relationship of the people and plants. That's my introduction for Paul, and please, Paul, do not hesitate. If there is anything that I forgot and didn't mention about you, please add it at the beginning of your presentations. And I would also like to say that that these sessions is going to be recorded as right now is recording, and the recording is going to be shared and to be available on the DEMN program websites. Paul is going to talk about the horticulture, the role of horticulture in disaster and emergency management for the next hopefully 40-45 minutes, and we will have a reserve of the 10 or 15 minutes for the exchange of the questions and the discussion and a little bit interaction with you guys at the end of the session. So, Paul, here you are. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mahood, and welcome everybody to this session on the role of horticulture in disaster and emergency management. So without further ado, I will start my presentation and do all the logistics here. So, okay. All right. Does everybody see this screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So, as mentioned, I've been a gardener for about 50 years, and part of that, for 40 years, I've been using the horticulture as a therapy in many of our institutions. And I'm going to be showing today where horticulture meets emergency and disaster management. I am not an expert at all in emergency and disaster management, but I do know a lot about horticulture, and also have experience when that interface between horticulture and emergency disaster management is taking place. So let's start off with a plant. This is a cherry tree. It is in Morioka City in Awati Prefecture in Japan. And it's about 400 years old, and it is called the split rock cherry tree for this very obvious reason that it's growing in between two rocks. But this is a way of introducing a friend of mine, and it's a colleague called Takashi Fujimura. And his firm actually looks after this split rock cherry tree, which is a national heritage tree in Japan. And we were actually covering the cherry tree with strings, ropes, so that it protects it from the snow. But we also became involved together in a project in Victoria at the Royal Jubilee Hospital. Morioka and Victoria are twin cities because of a famous Japanese statesman, Inazo Notobe, who was born in Morioka, Japan, but unfortunately he died here in Victoria at the Royal Jubilee Hospital. And both myself and Takashi Fujimura were involved in designing a therapeutic garden for that hospital. And we did a lot of fundraising together. So this is how the garden turned out. It's used a lot by patients and staff who come and visit, and particularly it's for visiting relatives as well. Over 30% of the patients that enter the hospital unfortunately die there. So there's a lot of grief and a lot of suffering that is going on there. And it's one of the gardens that is working 24/7 and 365 days a year, I'm very grateful to have worked with Takashi Fujimura on this project. One of the things I get is quite often I get cards from the nursing staff, and I'm just going to read out one because it really shows how in emergency settings having a garden is important. So it goes, I spent many coffee breaks and lunch breaks beside the pool and noticed people of all ages drawn to the cool quietness to meditate, read, and converse and de-stress. Vancouver Island Health Authority needs to know how important the gardens are, even to the wildlife on those hot summer days. As evening approached, every day the birds would come for a drink and a splash to cool themselves. Please know that what you have and will accomplish is a piece of magic, wonderful and changing always. It is precious. Thank you for this beauty amidst stress, pain, and sorrow illness brings. So it's a very powerful medium to use in healthcare facilities. However, in March the 11th, 2011, there was a huge earthquake and tsunami. And Morioka is in Iwate prefecture. And one of the places I was asked to work and do horticultural therapy programs was in a coastal town called Otsuchi. And I don't know how many of you remember some of the scenes of this particular disaster, but it was a huge impact on the culture of Japan. I'm going to show a video here, but this is the start of the tsunami entering this particular town called Otsuchi. And within 3 minutes, I'm not going to show the whole video, just a small clip, but within 3 minutes, most of what you see on the screen now has been totally destroyed. So I'm going to show it and hopefully the video will work.
大丈夫、いなさい、ここに。大丈夫、ここまで登らない。うわこんなに高くないから。うわ
So as you can see, it really didn't take very long for this particular tsunami to literally devastate the whole town. And 3 years afterwards, I was invited to visit this site, and this is what it looked like. It was 2 days after the anniversary of the tsunami, and it actually snowed the day before, and it gave it this kind of ethereal look. And I was shown around the site by the local people. And this is one of the things they said.
And even the mayor was taken by tsunami. So it was, people say it takes time to reconstruct in Ozuji compared to other towns and cities in the coast.
So as the person said, you know, the mayor of the town died in the tsunami and earthquake. And what you see in the cluster of buildings there is the city hall that they've left. But you can see the rest of the site is completely cleared. As I said, we visited the site. This is the city hall as we went there, and they had erected a shrine for the anniversary of the tsunami. And you can just see the devastation that the tsunami did. A lot of people think that, you know, it's just a wave, but it's a huge wall, a solid wall that hits the town. So I was asked to give a presentation to the community people there. There were principals of schools, community leaders, and it was to be held at Belgardea. And this garden, which is above Otsuchi in the hills, and it's a kind of a cross between an Italian garden and a Chinese and a Japanese garden. But what made this garden very unique, and it's famous worldwide now, is this telephone box. In Japanese, it's called kaze no denwa, which means wind phone. And it was built by a gentleman called Itaro Sasaki, and he lost his cousin in 2010. And it was a way of him communicating to his cousin. There's no phone line there or anything. But after the tsunami, it was used by people in the community that had lost their loved ones in the tsunami. And up to date now, I think there's been at least 30,000 people that have visited this telephone and picked up the telephone and had a conversation with their loved one who died or is gone missing in the tsunami. And there's a guest book there that people write comments in. And it was a very moving thing. And I've never seen a telephone booth used like this in the landscape. And I actually I wrote an article for the Canadian Landscape Association about it. So and on that day, actually, there was a newspaper article in the local papers about Sasaki-san and his telephone booth, and he's actually written a book about it. So I was doing the presentation to community leaders like principals of schools and other folks, and I wanted to show how easy it was to do gardening programs with very, very little resources. And so I showed them one particular activity in this building. And actually the building is used as a library now because the library was destroyed in the tsunami. So we started off with some seed packages. These are broccoli and perilla, or shiso as it's known. It's a herb that's used in Japan. So you start off with a few packages of seeds, and then you need some plastic cups and some tissues. And so people get very involved in this activity, and you can do all kinds of scientific experiments. You can use microwaved water. You can use all kinds of different things with even just growing something as simple as this. And you can write your name on it, so there's a sense of ownership, and people watch it grow. And then finally, you can all get together and eat them in a salad. So That was in Otsuchi, and I just want to switch to another group. This is in Fukushima, which maybe you're familiar with, that that area was affected, and particularly the nuclear power station. And there was radiation leaks. And this is a school close by the nuclear reactor and the school was fairly destroyed. And they've got children starting to grow plants in the schoolyard. They put in raised beds, but really what I want to share with you here is this particular picture. A lot of these children, because they were exposed to radiation, they are constantly being tested by doctors and who come up from Tokyo, and they're having, blood collected, they're having stethoscopes stuck in their way. So here the students are actually using stethoscopes to listen to the tree and to connect with the tree's health. And I thought that was a kind of an interesting kind of way of saying, hey, it's okay to be tested and checked out all the time, and you can do it to the trees. And I thought that was a kind of an interesting way to get the children kind of less nervous about being tested by all the doctors and etc. There was a big fear, of course, with food and being radiated upon. And one of the activities we'd like to do was to take them to a blueberry farm, which didn't have any radioactivity on it, just so they could really relax and explore, and eat something and have less fear about it, because there was a lot of fear afterwards around radiation and food and local food in particular. So this kind of was a normal activity for children to do and break that kind of fear of eating things that are outside or harvesting things that are outside. The next group I want to show is in Wataricho, and this is a group of buildings, portable buildings that are inhabited on a parking lot. And remember, this is 3 years later after the tsunami, and they are occupied by elderly people. I love this one because this woman is even gardening underneath an umbrella there, getting out some weeds. But I did a presentation for them, and it was just a wonderful feeling to go in there and help them out. And once again, it was a very simple activity. You don't even need a garden for this. So they were really engaged with what was going on. The people that were working with them, they said, well, when you demonstrate, they'll do exactly the same thing as what you do. But that didn't happen, and they were very creative. And I'll show you some of the materials that we were using. So just string toothpicks, chopsticks, seed packages, newspapers, different soils, different pens, colors of pens, and a plastic box where the soil and different sands and different materials were put in to give textures and to create a landscape within this box. So here you can see they've got different materials, some black soils, gravels, and large stones. And they started to share their experiences of gardening, which they probably hadn't done for at least maybe 3 or 4 years, and really connect with each other as they were creating these gardens. So as you can see, different styles. You've got, all kinds of things going on there. And the seeds themselves are all edible. So once again, they will sprout, and they will have like a chickpea tree or radish lawn. And after a few weeks, we all got together and had a big salad together. You can see they're really intently getting into this. And you see all kinds of different styles. Even, you know, even the plastic spoons are kind of interesting. This lady did a very interesting one for me, and that was she created two people out of green twist tie, and then she put a Japanese flag on one side and then a Canadian flag on the other. And she put a piece of string connecting both of us together. And I thought that was really sweet. You know, she said she was kind of almost representing and thanking me for coming all the way from Canada to share my love of gardening with them. So I thought that was a very expressive and creative way of sharing that with me. So as you can see, a wide group, mostly elderly ladies. There was a huge suicide rate of men after the tsunami because they had no work and no status, and particularly elderly men, they really didn't know what to do afterwards. They kind of lost their role in society. So most of these people that I was working with were elderly ladies. So one of the things I learned from Stephen and Rachel Kaplan, they're professors from Michigan State, they're environmental psychologists, is that to do small experiments, you don't need to spend millions of dollars to do research. And this was just a simple Wordle that we did. So when people wrote down the word, if it came up more and more, if you're familiar with Wordles, that particular word becomes larger. So the result of that was this Wordle. So as you can see, fun was the big one. Feeling happy, create your own garden. But I also like this along one side, it says feels nature's wind. So once again, wind has played a role in people's ideas of a garden and creating gardens. So I thought that was interesting that they used the expression "feel nature's wind." So as mentioned, I created a logic model for this work that was being done. So at the top, you can see inputs, outputs, and outcomes, and they're broken up into the outputs for activities, participation, and then the outcomes short, medium, and then long. So the inputs were the donations from the various NGOs and fundings, where the field office was. They had a country representative from AmeriCares, which was a non-profit organization that was helping fund it. There were staff therapists and local project implementers and the community volunteers. So some of the activities that were done, as you saw, were individual and community therapy programs, harvest gathering, indoor horticultural therapy activities, and revitalizing the kindergarten and nature game. And the participants were from the Fukushima prefecture and the Tōhoku region as a whole. And some of the short-term goals were to initially recover from PTSD. You can imagine some of the children that saw some of these events happening. I think the PTSD was about 90% in children in the Tōhoku region. And it was also for short term was to help with the treatment of loneliness, depression, and boredom, which affects everybody in this culture in the world these days. And the other one was short self-esteem and quality of life. Hey, look what I've done. You know, I'm improving things. And then social engagement. Now the medium outcomes were mental and physical health well-being, psychosocial benefits and improvements, and helping rebuild the community. And the long term, of course, is sustainability, effective and efficient psychosocial programmings using therapeutic horticulture. So that's a very brief kind of snapshot of how I have used horticulture in disaster and emergency management. And I'd really like to kind of hopefully plant a seed in some of you to in your research to use horticulture in some way to manage disaster and emergency in your lives and in your careers. So it's very brief, but I really wanted to hear a little bit of feedback from your students, Mahood, as far as how they see it could be used in their programming or their management of disaster and emergencies. So I'm going to actually leave it at that. And so thank you kindly. Here's my email address if you want to contact me. But I'd really like to hear from you guys what you think, and hopefully you'll act like a dandelion, and the idea of using horticulture as a therapy for disaster and emergency management will be helpful for you. So
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paul, for this very engaging and very eye-opening, presentation. At least for me, being, introduced to a new perspective regarding that disaster and emergency management. That's something that we are not used to discuss in our classrooms when we are talking about the disaster emergency management. This angle hasn't received enough attention in our either in our scientific literature or in our discussions. So thank you again for the also the questions. So I believe that among our audience, so we must have the interactions or maybe answer to your question at the end. So feel free to either write your the reaction and the interaction on the chat, or just raise your hand, open your microphone, and speak out. I have a couple of the questions for you, Paul, but I, as a moderator, I always try to not asking my question first and leaving the time for our audience. So we have a couple of the interaction here. So first, Amanda, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Paul. It was really interesting to listen to your presentation. I'm working on developing a regional emergency management plan in southern Alberta, and I actually thought today's presentation was going to be about recovery and planting and the impact of that after an emergency. And really, this just drove home the importance of people. And I would like to just do a follow-up with this with my people on this end of the value of taking these small steps for PTSD, or the phone booth example. Not what I was expecting to go through today. So I just really wanted to say thank you for that. Not a question, just a comment.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda. I'm glad it's giving you a new perspective. That's kind of really what I wanted to do, was kind of help people see that horticulture has a therapeutic and a rehabilitation technique. It's very effective, as well as you mentioned, it can improve the landscape or actually help with future disaster management. I'm sure the people in LA are going to be looking at, maybe we shouldn't have so many eucalyptus that just go into flames, and look at more resistant, fire-resistant trees and shrubs as they move forward, right? And certainly that needs to be looked at up here in Victoria as well, because that's a possibility that could happen here, as well as the earthquakes. So, I'm looking at seeing professionals like you, Amanda, and the other people that are online to plan for this, to put it into what ifs this happens, how do we incorporate horticulture into a rehabilitation and a therapeutic technique?
Oh, well, I guess I just take this back to the grassroots levels. We don't need to wait for an emergency to get people together to build those little planting gardens. So when I think about working this out with our social services department, it's just such a simple application that can be used before, during, and after a crisis. So that is one of the things I pulled out of your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you so much. So I also received a question here in chat. I will read it out for you, Paul.
Yeah.
Sarah asked, what role would you like to see horticultural play in future disaster management as a tool for both mitigation and recovery? And in her second question, maybe you want to answer both together. And she says that, are you involved in any current projects?
Well, I'm always involved in different projects, that's for sure, with hospitals, nursing homes, veterans, school children, a wide variety of different groups, as well as different cultures. And I've been working for about 40 years in this particular area of horticulture and the use of gardening as a therapy. And, you know, I mean, during COVID, or even after COVID, I think there was this huge surge of comments and writings about how it was a benefit for people during COVID, and I think that's still being maintained. And when I started, you know, horticultural therapy about 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't mainstream. And now you can't pick up a newspaper or watch something about the use of nature to deal with crises or therapeutic use. You know, you have things like forest bathing, shinrin-yoku, which is another Japanese term to immerse oneself in the atmosphere, the forest, and the actual chemicals of the tree lower cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, which is the one that, you know, leads to heart attacks and cancers and stuff like that. So getting back to Amanda's thing, that, you know, this could be you could be preparing for a disaster, but why not start doing it now, just for the therapeutic benefits, and have some form of infrastructure already in place for when the disaster or emergency comes, so that there's a connection and a plan for the use of horticulture when there is a disaster. So I'm not sure about the first part of the question, whether it was recovery of the landscape or recovery of people, but I'm going to assume it's maybe both. And certainly, you know, planting of trees, shrubs, the idea of food security too. You know, you can imagine if something happens on Vancouver Island, the ferries are not running, the planes are not running, where are we going to have food? Where's it coming in? So we're going to have to look internally and on Vancouver Island for our own food sources until it, you know, it gets fixed and we maintain. I mean, they might even move, you know, this capital from Victoria to the mainland, and what does all that mean to the people that live on Vancouver Island? So there has to be a little bit more of an independence as far as being able to grow food and have a better food security. Of course, you know, a lot of having seen Mahoud's presentation about Quebec floods, I'm sure there's a lot of trees and shrubs that can be used along river banks that can slow down flooding also slow down storm water as well. You know, that they capture some of the water that is that drains so quickly if there's no roots in the soil or any trees or shrubs to slow it down. So I'm sure from a geotechnical aspect of it that you could certainly start incorporating plants into that role.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paul. So we still have a time. Please don't hesitate to ask your question, write your comment in the chat. And so before I get another questions from our audience, I will take advantage of the asking my own questions, which may sound a bit of the, the challenging one. So often, especially, in the traditional societies, when there is the natural hazards, disasters, the relationship of the people with the nature being, a bit disconnected, being difficult because they used to blame nature for that disaster that happens. I wonder how it happened in Japan when you approach the communities, the elder people, and you wanted to rebuild again that connection, to invite them to again build a connection with the nature, build a connection with the with the plant, from blaming the nature as a causal factor or as a the causing the disaster to a source for rehealing, for the therapy. How did you the travel from one side to the other? And have you ever noticed such a tension?
That's a very good question, Mahmoud, because certainly, that they have seen how destructive nature can be. You know, I have a sign at home that says nature is a beast, and it certainly can be, particularly in earthquakes and tsunamis and fires and all those kind of things. So reconnecting them with the nurturing part of nature, as you're pointing out, is an important thing. But we're intuitively aware of our love of nature, and once they have a seed package or they're starting to plant something, it really connects them back to the love of the nature rather than the fear of nature. And I think that's a very important aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, with in Watari show, the men that had survived the tsunami, they were active on building raised beds, garden sheds, the infrastructure for the gardens the community gardens that they created. So that gave them a role, a purpose, a meaning. And also, the women of the communities were the ones that kind of did a lot of the seed sowing and harvesting. Those roles were pretty strict in the Tōhoku region, because the Tōhoku region itself in Japan is very poor. It's one of the poorest areas of Japan. So it's an important thing for them to be able to start growing their own food again after such an event. But as you can see, the result, just that simple wordle that was put together, they had fun. They reconnected with nature, and it took them from the fear to the love, and that's an important element of providing the opportunity for people to connect to plants in these situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I received another comment here, and the question actually from John. He said, if I understand correctly, you kick off the program 2 years after the event. Is there a time frame that you would see maximum benefit, especially in terms of the suicide? Were the reasons you were unable to access the community until that date?
Oh, well, just start with the last part. That I was welcomed into the community at that particular time. So it was, you know, I was busy doing other things between those years, but it was my connection with Takashi Fujimura, who looked after the split rock cherry tree in Morioka, and then we worked together on the hospital garden at the Royal Jubilee in Victoria, and it was a conversation that we had, and he made the connections to Sasaki-san, who had the wind phone, and different community groups, and arranged for me to come over. So there was just circumstantial that I didn't go any earlier. But it does show you that even 3 years later, there's still a huge need. As I mentioned, it's a poor prefecture, and there are a lot of politics going on there, Tokyo Olympics, etc., etc. So that's why I kind of entered at that particular time. Can you remind me what the rest of the question was?
Yeah, the rest of the question, the first part is that is there any, you know, the specific time frame for launching such activities to see the maximum benefit, more specifically in terms of the reducing the suicide rates?
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, early intervention, really. The sooner you can do it, the better. And that's why I just design very simple activities, like filling up an old, you know, a plastic beer mug with some herbs or seeds that they're familiar with, and that gets them going. And you know, some of them will maybe even plant some of those plants that are growing in the beer mug or beer cup into the ground as well, and then collect seed, or you know, and share the, you know, what they're growing. Yeah, you know, I'm growing this, look how it's growing, and then connecting with other people about it and sharing their wisdom about growing plants. So it's never too late, and it's never too early, really, to have intervention.
Perfect. Good to know. Thank you. So our next question comes from Mrs. and Mr. Blackburn. The question is a two-part question. So first one is that what effect is the salt water going to have on the soil around LA? I think that, you know, the question concerns the ongoing wildfire in LA. So the question is about what effect do you believe that is the salt water going to have on the soil around the area?
It has a short-term effect. With rains, etc. A lot of the salts are washed out from, you know, places like in Japan, where the tsunami you know, was from the ocean, waters from the ocean. But it's the same way that, you know, here in Victoria, you can go and get some seaweed from the beach and put it on your garden, and it will grow just as well. So it has minimal impact on further growing of plants in the ground. But also notice that the activities that we were doing were using soil from, you know, or even just tissues in this case, to grow plants. So I don't think it affected that much. I didn't see too many plants that were suffering from salt water. Even some of the pine trees that survived are still growing. And as far as the LA fires go, well, it's probably just acting as fertilizer for future plantings.
Perfect. And the second part of the question is that did the seawater swamp the Japanese land?
Did the seawater, sorry?
Swamp.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it went right inland in some places. You know, like maybe 10-20 miles inland in some of the flatter areas. And, you know, and covered airports and train stations and other forms of transportation. And yeah, it was incredible how far it did go inland.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. So still we have a time, please do not hesitate to ask your question. Especially I like this presentation because, you know, your presentation, Paul, was short and sweet and very effective and gave us enough time for this exchange of the, you know, the question and the discussion that we have. That's very, very interesting, actually. Thank you so much. So do we still have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Sorry,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
on the
Lori.
phone, so I can't organize my video somehow. But yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, and I really appreciated seeing the role of horticulture in recovery. One of the things I wanted to mention, and I hadn't thought about this for some time, was I was doing some research work in Australia. And what the community there, after the bushfires had devastated and killed all of the, you know, all the plants and everything around them, they came up with this idea of having a plant day. And what they did is they actually got, it was 10,000 bulbs donated to the community from across Australia, various parts of Australia. And what they did is they declared a community plant day. They closed the schools. You know, everyone in the community came out to plant these 10,000 bulbs so that the next spring, all these plants came up and created this, even though the recovery and reconstruction hadn't taken place everywhere, you know, every sort of street corner property had some of these beautiful flowers coming up on their properties. And it really enhanced people and gave them something to look forward to and to hope for, and got the whole community involved. And I was just thinking, you know, when you mentioned that, and then the discussion of the LA fires, and then I'm thinking of the Jasper fires, like, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get something in those communities organized? Because even in Jasper now, they still haven't even cleared all the debris away. And there's these missed opportunities, I think, to reconnect back with nature and planting around that. So it could be trees as well as just, you know, flowers with color, etc. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that and wanted to thank you for that. And I think it's something that could be really looked at.
Well, thanks, Laurie. I know for myself, I'm looking out at some, you know, snowdrops, you know, the signs of spring. You know, we wouldn't feel that we're in the depths of winter on a beautiful day like today, but when it was gray and rainy and cold, we certainly look for those signs. I mean, plants are used for significant events in people's lives and cultures. You've got the Christmas tree, you've got Valentine's roses. So, you know, once again, bulbs have a significance. And the good thing about bulbs is it's hard to go wrong. You know, you put them in the ground and they just grow. And unless you've got squirrels like mine. But you know, I mean, Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said, you know, that healing is a matter of time, but it's also a matter of opportunity. And that's what struck me, Laurie, when you said that, you know, how can we have the opportunity to develop these things and get them into communities? And picking up once again with Amanda, don't wait. Let's start doing it. We should be doing it now for all kinds of different reasons. And that's basically what I've been trying to do for the last 40 years, is to get horticulture and the healing benefits of horticulture into our institutions. And I think it's a very important thing to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laurie and Paul. And do we still have any question from the audience? No. If not, so
Hello,
maybe...
I have a
sure.
comment.
Yeah, sure.
I'm the other half of the team of C. Blackburn. The other question came from my wife, who is here with me. Paul's a recent friend of mine, and it's got nothing to do with horticulture, but it has to do with management of things that can go wrong or affect your life. And I was intrigued by the wind phone, and I was intrigued by it because we have a place up on Gabriola Island, and on Gabriola Island is a wind phone. And I'd never heard of wind phone, and I came across it by accident. It was installed under a bench in one of the parks there, and I used it to speak with a friend of mine who just passed away. And some people might think this is a ridiculous thing to do, but for me it was very meaningful. And I happened to mention it to Paul, and he said, "I've seen the original wind phone." And he told me about the one which you saw in the picture. And I guess what I'm trying to promote here is wind phones, because I think they can be very helpful in helping people get over their loss. I think that's all I have to say. Well, thanks for a great talk, Paul. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Charlie and Christine. Yeah, good questions, and thank you for the thought. Yeah, it has the wind phone has propagated worldwide right now, and it's kind of one of those things that is a good thing that has come out of all this death and destruction. Is something like the Denwa, Kaze no Denwa, the wind phone. And thank you for your comments.
Thanks. Thank you also, Charles, for sharing that with us. Thank you so much. Perfect. So I also shared, something in the chat. So this is a link to our new webpage. In this new webpage, I invite you to see our upcoming lectures, scheduled lectures for the following months. And also, again, one more time, the recording of this presentation also will be posted on this webpage. So this is a place that you can see the upcoming lectures and also the recordings of the previous lectures. Thank you, all of you, for your active participation in this session. Especially thank you, Paul. It was amazing. I personally enjoyed your presentation and your answers to those amazing questions.
Thank you, Mahmoud.
Thank you so much. Have a very good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.